Welcome everyone to Horizon. This is a place to network, learn, and unwind. So let me start my presentation. From source to pay to intake to outcomes, and I think the important word there is outcomes. I think agentic, and as I'll share, our thoughts, Zycus thoughts, my thoughts in terms of what agentic can do for procurement over the years. But one thing for sure, agentic will be tied to outcomes, as we'll see. Quickly, Zycus has been around for a couple of decades, and we have multiple patents. But our first patent, which we got in 2002, was in machine learning. Correct. So machine learning became deep learning, which became AI now. In terms of what AI, obviously, one is always fear of AI in terms of efficiency or job loss, but it's also in terms of what AI can do wrong. It's good to see Victoria as a very bold vision on AI. At the same time, what we've seen in government, you have to do AI very cautiously. And what we recommend is always start from the inside, correct? So if you don't really start with citizen facing. So if, for example, in procurement, don't start autonomous negotiation upfront in government. So I think it's very important, but there are lots of opportunities in government within the organization where AI can make a significant impact. Obviously, the priorities are different for public sector and enterprises. Procurement is a policy instrument. Diversity has to be encouraged. Transparency and auditability. I think auditability you can get with AI. Explainability, I think people talk about it, but AI itself will never be able to explain why it got the answer. So I think audit really works well over there in terms of what are the things which it did, and then you put a human in the loop over there where there are critical decisions which you do not want AI to completely own. But again, there's a lot of stuff which is common. Obviously, a lot of challenges in orchestrating and organizing across your stakeholders, procurement, and so on. So, whether it's intake, sourcing, contracting, correct? So the only difference which we see in government is a strong governance layer, correct? So the way we have built AI is you can have policy rules. So in the policy rules, you really put a lot of governance and also a lot of auditability into the entire AI process and the human in the loop, correct? You'd want human in the loop much more than what you're going to have outside of government. Now coming to, so again, what can be expected over there? I think some use cases are very obvious in government also, where you could take intake. There's a lot of challenges, getting from a lot of different people, all the requirements, and then following a compliant process. So intake really helps in that. Intake can also ensure that you look at suppliers, which you should be using over there, correct? Making sure according to policy, whatever the suppliers for that certain category. And obviously there is, marketplaces where your government marketplaces, which can also be put in as part of the, standard intake process. So again, as I mentioned earlier, better to start internally from intake and then you go to sourcing and contracts. Those are the best use cases for AI within government. Now just stepping back, correct, on agentic AI. And before I go to agentic AI, we have been doing AI for many years. And what's happening today, I'll use an analogy not to the internet era or even the PC era, correct? You have to go a century back where you had the industrial revolution. It did not just bring around incremental change, correct? It was foundational change. It kind of rewrote industries. It changed how the world operated. And at least I'm really convinced that AI is going to do the same, because what machines did over there for the muscle, AI is going to do the same thing in terms of human reasoning and intelligence, not creativity. So LLM is foundational, but if you consider in the industrial revolution, it required factories to come in, correct? You have assembly lines, you have motors, engines, and processes which kind of move in a sequence to deliver an end output. And that's the same thing where people are talking about agentic AI. It's the LLM working below. It's at 1% layer on top, which orchestrates, which coordinates, which works towards a goal. So agentic AI is built on top of your LLMs to ensure that it's not just doing one thing, it is doing multiple things over there to get to an end goal. So if you look at how AI has evolved, correct? I talked about machine learning, and then you have deep learning, correct, which came in around 2012. That was the inflection point for the current age. But then you had the LLMs come in. Now for LLMs, organizations and people really started using it in two ways, correct? You had the ChatGPT, so for your organization equivalent, it is Copilot, correct? You have Copilot, which really helps you with stuff. Or like providers like Zycus, we put in, I think, 55 different apps, all across the product, summarize my contract or generate an RFP. That is all passive. I think it is useful, but up to a point, correct? Because it's targeting only a certain area. The next thing is Agentic AI, which really looks at an outcome and then works backwards from it. So we did a survey with the Hackett group, and this is a global survey, and 65% of the procurement leaders are looking at AI to really help orchestrate many of the business workflows. And there's a significant budget shift. I was talking to a customer in Europe, and they mentioned they have $20 million earmarked over the next 2 years for AI within procurement and 2-3 other functions. So a lot of budget is also now moving into AI. So what is Agentic AI? It's an outcome. It's like, okay, you want to plan a vacation. Right now, your vacation, it has to really understand what are the interests of different people in your family over there, what are the time they are available for. And then you go to some sites, you check the weather, then you go and do your bookings, and then you do your check-in and all of that. So the entire process, so the outcome should be a happy vacation, correct? So I think the entire process of agents coordinating amongst themselves and getting to an end goal is Agentic AI. And this is something which I'm very sure is going to happen, where you'll have an organization chart where you have people. For each role, there will be multiple agents which are going to really support that person over there, correct? In effectively being part of the team. So for example, if you have contract manager, correct? So there'll be someone to help on contract renewals, contract obligation management, and so on. So obviously, the flip side to it is you would now need people who are really very creative and being able to guide the agents in terms of what they do. So what outcomes you really desire is still where the human intelligence comes in, and the agents are going to do a lot of the execution. So what is our vision? I talked about intake to outcomes. So if you see from the left, you have intake, which is taking requests from your stakeholders and converting it into an outcome through different agentic flows, correct? Whether it is sourcing, contracting, and so on. The other thing is also for your strategic sourcing. So it's not just intake, which is an input. You also have your annual strategy where you're going to look at each of your category strategies. So for those category strategies, identifying the strategy, AI will help you look at external sources for identifying the strategy. And from that, you have a sourcing plan, which will again flow into it over there. So although we talk intake to outcomes, it is also, category to outcomes. I think both of those will create a complete, story over there for procurement. So what you have is, if I start from the right to the left, you have agents. So an agent, for example, you could have an agent which will do supply discovery and then hand it off over to a requirements agent, correct? Which will then hand off to a negotiation agent. So these agents orchestrate, and these agents talk to the software below through tools. So the tools you could consider are the execution, correct? Find me a supplier over there which has got very high reliability and which my other business units have had good satisfaction in using, correct? So that tool then answers that question. So tool is also intelligent, but intelligent at a lower level. So it you have to give it a pointed question and it will give a pointed answer. Whereas agent can, you can say, okay, I want to source something which is, really competitive in the market, but at the same time, you really want to look at technology change, which is happening over the next 3 years, and get a vendor accordingly. So agents are higher level of reasoning, and the tools would be doing pointed stuff. And these tools, Zycus has those tools. One thing you can see is right now when you have the Zycus tools, they're going to sit on top of Zycus Source-to-Pay. So if you see the third layer, but also with external systems, because every organization has got multiple different systems. You might have a supplier risk system which could be outside, correct? So our agent would sit on top of not just Zycus source to pay, but also other systems. Now, this is a big change which we did a couple of years back. Initially, you're building a lot of small agents, correct? Tools, which are, I call it, across the entire source to pay. Then we said, let's focus on a couple of blockbuster agentic flows. So I use the word blockbuster, where it can have a significant impact in terms of outcomes. The way we did it is we have an AI council. The AI council, we meet over there regularly. These are global CPOs. And from there came the ideas that let's take a couple of areas where AI can make a measurable impact. And what we defined as a measurable impact is anything which can take 30 to 40% of a person's role. So if you consider autonomous negotiation, correct, it could take 30 to 40% of a buyer's role. There are many other things a buyer would be doing, but a tactical buyer, they'll be spending a good percentage of time over there, buying, the small stuff. So the first agentic flows we came up with is intake, because people spend a huge amount of the time, through emails, calls, and so on, just coordinating with their business stakeholders. The second is what we call ANA, which is Autonomous Negotiation Agent, which is more for the tail spend. It doesn't do, strategic spend. And that's our next agent, which we are currently working on. The first two are live, and the next one is Merlin Agentic Sourcing, which will, once you see a demo of this later on, right? Once you decide with what you want to do, it will guide you through that entire strategic sourcing process. Merlin Agentic Sourcing is obviously more human in the loop, and autonomous negotiation, because it's smaller amount of spend. For some categories, you can just let it run autonomously. We are going to do each and every of the procurement flows as Merlin Agentic, and I'll come to that later, what it will imply for the customer. But we are taking each one and going very deep into it. So Merlin Intake, I think a lot of you know about it. It's the AI control tower. It's the intelligent front door to procurement. So any request, if it comes in, AI will automatically, classify it, route it, to the right buying channel. It could also give it to autonomous negotiation for doing, the 3 bids and a buy for simple items. It could give it to a sourcing agent and so on. So here, and again, you're going to see a demo, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it. But Merlin Intake does 2 things. One, every organization has a policy, correct, which you want the end user to comply with. So AI automatically understands that policy, and then it routes the user or guides the user through a particular path. So you achieve 2 things. One thing, you get compliance with what you really want in terms of go to your preferred suppliers or do this step first. And obviously for a casual business user, it also makes it very user friendly, because they don't need to know how to really navigate the application and what to do. It's a chat based interface, and it will guide you over there to what are the next steps in terms of doing. So it's very similar to how you'd interact with ChatGPT. And it is in Microsoft Teams, so that also helps, because that's collaboration platform which is used in many organizations. And intake, we always believe that built-in will beat bolt-on, because for AI to work, it really needs to get to the innards of the data, correct? And you need to have a lot of fine-grained controls in how you can access that data, and that's always available if you built in to a source-to-pay platform as opposed to bolting onto it. Tail spend is always a challenge. It's a lot of fragmented, small amount of spend, which is usually not worth the bother, but you have to spend time on it. So what Merlin Autonomous Negotiation Agent does is there are different agents which, and I'm not showing all of them. For example, there's a new agent which we added, which is price benchmarking, which will look at your historical pricing, market pricing, and then come up with it. Or there is a category strategy, correct? Depending on different categories, it would identify what parameters should be used for negotiation. It's not just price. So for example, you see over here, I mentioned about multiple parameters, especially when you're doing services. It's not just negotiation on one parameter. So it automatically helps identifying what should be the parameters you should be negotiating with the supplier on. So I think one thing which is very important in AI, and we have added an AI agent to evaluate the outcomes also. It's very important, everybody's spending on AI. You really need to also be able to showcase in terms of what value is being generated through AI. And AI does a good job of it. You could have another agent look at, what are the outcomes. It could be quantitative, it could be qualitative outcomes, but AI can really summarize that very well. The next we are going to have is Merlin Agentic sourcing, and based on the AI Council feedback, we are breaking it up into Merlin Agentic category management and then Merlin Agentic sourcing. So here what we are showing is, from a certain category, you can identify what could be the opportunities and then convert it into a sourcing plan. But now we are focusing on just the sourcing part first and then building category management. So it can access data across this entire Zycus source-to-pay system, but also external data which you would have, and then help you, build your entire RFP, help in evaluation of the RFP responses, and as well as in, optimization if you need that for, awarding multiple suppliers. Now AI, obviously you hear about it in the news everywhere. So everyone is talking about AI and everyone is jumping onto the AI bandwagon. For Zycus, we have been doing AI. Merlin was launched in 2018. So we have a lot of experience and a lot of data, because data is very important for AI, because AI runs on data as a fuel. So these are products which are already live in production. We had Intake 2.0 and then we released Intake 4.0, which is a pure AI reasoning intake interface. And then the same for autonomous negotiation. It's already live with customers, with events happening and concluding with almost 4% or so savings. Now, as we are working on AI, it's very important because AI is finally a layer which is going to sit on top of your business layer, correct? Where all your workflows, your DOAs, all of that would be there in the source-to-pay suite. So as we are continuously working on the agentic AI, we are also strengthening the layer below. So you have the source-to-pay foundational layer. Very soon, what you're interacting with currently as a Zycus application will start kind of receding in the background, but it would still be the system of record. It would still be, your audit trail. It will still be a final check before something is going to get committed into your financial system. So you have the source-to-pay suite as a foundation, and then you have agentic AI, and then you have guided intake or guided strategy, category strategy at the top. So again, we have a split of almost, I think, around 60-40 or 2/3, 1/3 of people working on the foundational source-to-pay, and then we have, the team working on agentic AI to sit on top of it. And what's very useful, what's helping us in the AI is also having a single data model. So if you're going to have AI really, needs to be able to access data across all the different systems. So we have organically built the application, and that just helps us, in the ease of AI to be able to access the data. Now, AI is not just in our products. We're also using it for customer success. Customer support is one of the first places where AI is really getting used a lot to be able to deflect tickets, which come in. And the same at Zycus, Merlin Help is really helping in a lot of, the support use cases. The second is on faster time to value. In terms of the entire implementation process, it's still not fully agentic. Agentic is you give a requirement and the system is ready at the end of it, which the team is working to build on. But there are different ways, AI is being used over there in the entire implementation process. If you want to see the future of AI, correct, in terms of what impact it can have in procurement, the best place to look for is in software engineering. It's happening at a pace which you cannot imagine. People in procurement would not be able to imagine the pace at which AI is really doing stuff which was unimaginable that software could really do. In engineering, we've already gotten close to 70% reduction in effort. So we have half the team doing double the effort, right? So whether Andrea mentioned, 40%, Labdi mentioned 50% over there, correct? That is definitely achievable over time. And I think software people are, using it very aggressively. In fact, most of the spend on AI, which is going on agentic, is all going into software development. 80% or 90% of that. People are consuming tokens like crazy. So we are also using it extremely heavily in engineering, correct? Like I said, we've gotten a 4x productivity increase, which is like a 75% reduction in effort in writing software. And if you can write software, obviously you can write RFPs also. So what are the learnings from Zycus internally? And we are a passionate believer in AI. So, right from the top, we really push a lot. We have, every team working on AI targets. The first is you experiment. I think the good thing about AI is you can do it really fast. And this is an example where it was not even a software team. A marketing team wanted to hire some business development associate. They couldn't hire fast enough. They built an AI thing which can interview like a human, and it's doing as good as 7 out of 10 recruiters. And it interviews, candidates over there and filters them to get them to the next level. And it's already done in 10,000 plus interviews. So you just have to, tools are available. You just need to get either yourself or, just get an AI engineer. One AI engineer can really build a lot of stuff and you can start experimenting with it. The second thing is it's always change management. Even in our organization, it required a lot of push and shove over there to get people to do it. So we have every month without fail where every department presents on AI. Products is one, but internally also. And they present outcomes. We say, but don't say you have implemented this AI, that AI. Either it has improved your NPS, reduced your cycle time, improved your efficiency, and so on. And as I mentioned, you need to give clear targets for it. Everything does not have to be just about efficiency. There could be many other goals which you can, like for example, strategic sourcing RFP could take 3 months over there, correct? How can you reduce the 3 month to 1 month, correct, for complex categories? So I think the targets have to be put, and you'll be surprised people how they work backwards towards it. This is a vision where, again, over the next 5 years, where do we see Zycus going? It will start going from software to autonomous systems. Now, it could be autonomy, it could be human-controlled autonomy, correct? Human in the loop. Right now, the UI which you see, which is buttons and tabs, that UI is going to go away. Right now, we started with intake, and then we'll have we have autonomous negotiation. It will continue across the entire source-to-pay suite. So the entire UI would be conversational because you cannot interact with AI through rigid structures of pages. AI needs fluidity, correct? That's why if you see even ChatGPT still doesn't give a lot of buttons and clicks over there because it blocks that flow because AI wants to go in any direction towards the end goal. So this is the direction which we're going in. Agentic AI will slowly, make our current software which we have more as a backend system of record, and then you have a more intelligent layer sitting on top of it. With that, I'd like to close and thank you everyone.